Look into the obsidian mirror and face the truth that the world has been trying to hide from you for so long. We explore the dark reflections of our society and the hidden beauty that lies within the shadows. Click subscribe now and see yourself in a completely new light.
My sister-in-law announced her engagement at a rooftop restaurant in downtown Nashville, and my mother-in-law made sure I understood exactly where I stood before the appetizers even arrived. I had driven 4 hours from Atlanta for this dinner. My husband Theo. No, wait. I need to use different names. Let me start over properly. I'd been with my husband for 6 years when his family finally stopped pretending I didn't exist and started pretending something worse, that I existed but only barely. That I was the kind of woman you tolerated at the table but never introduced to the people who mattered. His name was Grant. His mother's name was Lorraine. His sister was Becca, 24 years old and freshly engaged to a man named Holden, who came from old Memphis money and wore it the way people do when they've never had to think about it, loosely, easily, like a jacket they might leave behind somewhere without noticing. The engagement party was held at a private event space in East Nashville, the kind of venue that used to be a warehouse and now cost $4,000 for a Saturday evening. Exposed brick, Edison bulbs, a catering company I recognized because I had used them before, professionally, for an event that cost more than the entire Ashford family. Grant's family had probably spent on a single occasion in the last decade combined. I did not mention this. I had learned over 6 years of marriage to Grant that mentioning things was rarely worth the cost. I wore a green dress that evening, simple cut. It had cost me $300 at a boutique in Buckhead, which was neither expensive nor cheap, which was exactly the point. I had learned to dress the way I moved through Grant's family gatherings, carefully in a register that communicated nothing definitive. Not too polished. Not too plain. The kind of invisible that doesn't draw questions. Grant's family was already assembled when we arrived. His mother Lorraine stood near the bar with 2 women I recognized as her closest friends from church, the kind of women who had been performing genteel Southern hospitality so long that the performance had become indistinguishable from the thing itself. His father, a man named Stewart who had retired early from a regional insurance company and spent his days playing golf and complaining about the federal government, stood near the entrance with his arm around Becca like she was a trophy he was displaying. Nobody looked up when we walked in. Grant's hand found the small of my back. Reflex, not intention. He was already scanning the room for his father, already shifting into the particular social posture he adopted around his family, slightly larger, slightly louder, slightly less like the man I had married. I understood. I had always understood. That was possibly the problem. Becca spotted us from across the room and came over with her arms already open, her engagement ring catching the light in a way that was clearly not accidental. She hugged Grant for a long time. She hugged me for exactly the duration required by social convention and not a single second longer. "You look tired," she said to me pleasantly. "Long drive," I said. "Of course," she said, and turned back to her brother. Lorraine arrived at my elbow approximately 90 seconds later, which was how long it took her to cross the room and position herself between me and her son with the practiced efficiency of someone who had been running interference for years. "Meredith," she said. My name in her mouth always sounded like a mild inconvenience. "So glad you could make it." "We wouldn't have missed it," I said. She smiled at Grant. They began talking about Holden's family, about the wedding venue Becca was already considering, about a property in Brentwood that Holden's parents were gifting the couple as a wedding present. 3 bedrooms, she said. Good school district. Holden's father knew the developer personally. At no point during this conversation did Lorraine address me directly again. I was used to this. I had been used to this for 6 years. The particular art form of being present in a room while simultaneously being treated as though your presence required no acknowledgement, no engagement, no consideration. I had watched it happen at Thanksgiving and Christmas, in the 4th of July cookout, and every birthday dinner and every Sunday lunch that Grant's family had organized in the time I had known them. What I had not watched was myself. Somewhere around year 3, I had made a decision so quiet I hadn't even fully articulated it to Grant. I had stopped trying to earn my way into Lorraine's approval. I'd stopped correcting the assumptions she made about me, stopped offering context she had no interest in receiving, stopped performing the particular kind of eager accessibility that Lorraine seemed to require from the women her son brought home. I had instead built something. I didn't talk about it at Grant's family events. I didn't mention it to Lorraine or Stuart or Becca or any of the extended network of cousins and church friends and golf buddies who populated the Ashford family social universe. I didn't mention the portfolio, or the clients, or the boutique property investment firm I had been quietly growing for 4 years while Grant's family continued to categorize me as the wife who did something with real estate in the vague, dismissive way you might describe someone who sold craps on Etsy. I did real estate. Specifically, I bought distressed commercial properties in secondary markets, repositioned them, and either held them for cash flow or sold them to institutional buyers. I had done this over 4 years with enough consistency that my firm managed a portfolio worth significantly more than anything the Ashford family had ever discussed at a dinner table. None of them knew this. I had not hidden it exactly. I simply hadn't volunteered it, and no one had ever asked with enough genuine curiosity to receive a genuine answer. The party continued around me. Lorraine circulated through the room with the confidence of a woman in her native habitat, which this essentially was. She had organized the event, selected the venue, approved the catering, and prepared the guest list, which consisted almost entirely of people who already thought of Becca and Holden as the natural inheritors of a particular kind of Southern upper-middle-class success. A woman I didn't recognize approached me near the charcuterie table. She had the look of someone's mother, pleasant, well-dressed, mildly curious. "Are you a friend of Becca's?" she asked. "I'm her sister-in-law," I said. "Oh." A brief recalibration. "Of course. Lorraine's mentioned. She talks about Grant all the time. Such a wonderful young man." She did not say that Lorraine had mentioned me. We both understood why. "He is," I agreed. She told me about her daughter, who was in Becca's bridesmaid lineup. She told me about a recent trip to Charleston. She asked me nothing about myself, and I offered nothing, and after 4 minutes she excused herself to refresh her drink, and the conversation ended the way most of my conversations at Grant's family events ended, completely. It was around this point that I noticed the text message. My phone was in my clutch, and I felt the vibration before I heard anything. I knew before I looked that it would be from my business partner, a woman named June who handled client relations with a particular kind of warmth and sharpness that I had never quite managed to replicate. June had been with me since year 2. She knew everything about the firm and nothing about Grant's family, which was exactly how I preferred to organize these 2 portions of my life. Her message was 4 words: "Keating wants to meet." I read it twice. The Keating Group was a private equity firm out of Chicago that had been circling our portfolio for 18 months. They had looked at 2 of our properties and passed, not because the assets weren't strong, but because we were, at that point, still too small for their typical deal size. 18 months later, that had changed. We had closed 3 additional acquisitions since then, all of them in markets that Keating understood and respected, and the firm's managing director had apparently decided that the conversation was worth having. This was not a small thing. The Keating meeting, if it went the way June and I had been quietly positioning for, could represent the kind of institutional validation that would permanently change the scale of what we were building. I slid the phone back into my clutch. Across the room, Lorraine had gathered a small audience near the windows and was in the middle of telling a story that involved Holden's family's lake house in Middle Tennessee. I watched her gestures, expansive, proprietary, and understood that this was not really a story about a lake house. It was a performance of social coordinates. She was placing Becca and Holden into the correct bracket so that everyone in the room understood what kind of future they were celebrating tonight. Grant materialized at my side with 2 glasses of wine. He handed me one without meeting my eyes. He was watching his mother. "You okay?" he asked. "I'm fine," I said. He nodded. He believed me, which was either a testament to how well I had learned to hold things quietly, or a measure of how thoroughly he had stopped looking. Lorraine finished her lake house story, and the small audience laughed at whatever conclusion she had arrived at. Then she said something I heard clearly from 15 feet away, because she had pitched her voice at exactly the level she always used when she wanted to be heard without appearing to be performing. "Grant has always been the practical one," she said. "He married practical." A small pause. "Some men need that. Several people glanced in my direction. The glances were brief and carefully neutral, the look of guests who recognized something was happening but had no particular stake in involving themselves. I did not react. I had learned, through years of these moments, that reacting was the only move that could be used against me. Grant's jaw tightened. He said nothing. He also had learned things over 6 years, though what he had learned was different from what I had learned. He had learned that intervening made the aftermath harder, that silence was its own kind of management, that his mother's behavior existed in a category of things he could not change and had mostly accepted. I understood this. I had not always been able to accept it, but I understood it. "Practical," said one of Lorraine's church friends, in a tone that made it sound like a consolation prize. I excused myself to the bathroom. Standing at the sink, I ran cold water over my wrists, an old habit from law school. From the years before I had built enough distance from other people's opinions to stop needing the physical reset. I looked at myself in the mirror. Green dress, hair that I'd spent 40 minutes on before we left Atlanta, earrings that cost more than Lorraine's entire outfit and that she had never once noticed or commented on. I thought about the Keating meeting. I thought about the property we had just closed in Columbus, Ohio. A distressed mixed-use building in a neighborhood that 3 different analysts had told me was at the beginning of a 10-year cycle. I bought it anyway because I had done my own analysis and I trusted it, and the early indicators were proving me right in the exact way that early indicators did when you had developed the ability to read them correctly. I thought about the 47-unit apartment complex in Huntsville, Alabama, that we had repositioned over 18 months and sold last spring for a return that had made June cry a little at her desk because neither of us had fully believed the number until it landed in the account. I thought about Lorraine saying practical the way you might say adequate. I dried my hands and went back to the party. The evening continued with the self-sustaining momentum of well-organized social occasions. Toasts were made. Holden's father gave a speech about the importance of finding a partner who understood your values, and the speech was warm and specific and clearly rehearsed, and it made Becca cry in the photogenic way she had always cried. And Lorraine watched her daughter with an expression of total satisfaction. During the speeches, I felt my phone vibrate again. I didn't look at it. I stood next to Grant and applauded at the appropriate moments and kept my face in the arrangement that I had learned to maintain at these events. Attentive, pleasant, entirely unreadable. After the formal portion of the evening concluded and the room dissolved back into conversation and movement, Lorraine found me near the dessert table. She arrived with a woman I didn't recognize, someone in her 60s with the particular confidence of old money, the kind that doesn't announce itself because it has never needed to. She was introduced to me as Patricia, a longtime friend of the family. "Meredith does something with properties," Lorraine said by way of introduction. The phrase "something with properties" carried the specific weight of deliberate diminishment. It was the language of someone describing a hobby to someone who had a career. Patricia looked at me with mild, polite curiosity. "Investment?" she asked. "Commercial real estate," I said. "Residential or commercial?" "Commercial," I said again, "primarily value-add acquisitions in secondary markets." Something shifted in Patricia's expression. It was subtle, a slight sharpening of attention, the way a person's face changes when they move from being politely present to actually listening. "What markets?" she said. I named 3. She nodded at each of them with the specific nod of someone who understood why those markets mattered and when. "Interesting timing on all 3, she said. "You're seeing what I'm seeing in the cycle?" "I think so," I said. 18 months ago, the fundamentals were getting interesting. Now they're very interesting. Lorraine had gone quite still beside us. Patricia asked me 2 more questions. I answered both of them concisely and accurately, and at some point during my second answer, she stopped performing the social pleasantry of the conversation and started having it in earnest. Her posture changed. She angled slightly away from Lorraine and toward me. "You said value-add acquisitions," she said. "What's your typical hold period?" We talked for 11 minutes. I know it was 11 minutes because I glanced at my phone once and then again and calculated the interval. In those 11 minutes, Lorraine made 3 attempts to redirect the conversation toward Becca's wedding timeline, the new property in Brentwood, and the charity luncheon she was organizing in March. Each attempt floated gently past us and landed nowhere. Patricia had the focused quality of someone who, when she found something worth paying attention to, paid attention to it completely. At the end of 11 minutes, she said, "I chair the investment committee for a family foundation. We've been looking at alternatives for a portion of the endowment." This is exactly the kind of conversation I wasn't expecting to have tonight. She asked for my card. I gave her one from my clutch. I always carried 3 or 4, which Grant knew and Lorraine found faintly absurd. Patricia took it and looked at it for a moment before placing it in her own small evening bag with a deliberateness that communicated, "This is not the card of someone I am being polite to. This is a card I am keeping." She excused herself to find her husband, who apparently needed to hear about this conversation. Lorraine and I stood together for a moment in the small silence Patricia had left behind. "That's Patricia Holloway," Lorraine said. Her voice had a quality I hadn't heard in it before, something between information and recalibration. Her family started Holloway Capital. Her husband was on the board of 3 different banks before he retired. "I didn't know that," I said. "She doesn't talk about money," Lorraine said. It came out almost like an accusation. "Most people with real money don't," I said. I said it gently, not as an attack. It was simply true, and I had learned that sometimes the truest things could be delivered without sharpness if you kept your voice even enough. Lorraine looked at me. For the first time in 6 years, she looked at me the way you look at something you have been misreading, the expression of someone whose internal map has just discovered that the terrain doesn't match. She excused herself. I watched her cross the room toward Stuart, and I saw the moment she began speaking to him in a low, careful voice, the two of them glancing toward me with an expression I recognized and had not seen directed at me before. They were recalculating. Grant appeared at my elbow. "What was that?" he said quietly. "A conversation," I said. He looked at me. Then he looked at the direction Lorraine had gone, then back at me. She seemed really engaged. "She was interesting," I said. "She asked good questions." He was quiet for a moment. "My mom looks weird, I said. I looked at my phone. June had sent a follow-up. "Keating wants the full portfolio deck by Friday. This is real." I responded quickly, "I'll send it Thursday. It's already half built." Grant read over my shoulder without meaning to. "What's the Keating Group?" "Private equity," I said. "Out of Chicago. They've been looking at our portfolio." He didn't say anything for a moment. Then, "How seriously?" "Seriously enough," I said. He nodded slowly. He was doing arithmetic in his head. I could see it. Grant was not a stupid man. He had always known, in a general way, that I had a business and that the business was doing well. He had not, I suspected, done the arithmetic in a while. "Becca found us before he finished the calculation. Meredith?" She was flushed and happy, her fiancé's arm around her shoulders. "We have to talk about the wedding. I was thinking Atlanta, actually. There's a venue in Buckhead I'd been obsessed with." She talked about the venue for 3 minutes. She described the gardens, the ballroom, the bridal suite. She was genuinely excited, and it was genuinely infectious, and I found myself responding to it honestly, because the happiness in her face was real even if her relationship with me had never been. Over her shoulder, I saw Lorraine watching us. The expression on her face was new. It was trying to be normal, trying to perform the slightly proprietary warmth that was her default setting at family events. But something underneath it had shifted, and the performance was running about a half-second slow, the way a live broadcast lags when the signal drops. Patricia Holloway returned with her husband, a man in his late 60s, who shook my hand and asked 3 specific questions about the Columbus acquisition, and then said, "We'd love to have a proper conversation. Are you in Nashville often?" "We can be," I said. Lorraine was close enough to hear this. I was not cruel about it. I didn't look at her, didn't acknowledge that our proximity was relevant. But she heard it. And she heard the register in which it was said, not social nicety, not polite vagueness, but the language of people who had something real to discuss. Stuart appeared at Lorraine's side. He put his hand on her arm. They spoke quietly for a moment, and then Stuart walked over and extended his hand to me. "I don't think we've had a real conversation," he said. He said it with the slight discomfort of a man acknowledging something that should have been different. "No," I said pleasantly. "We haven't. He asked me about Atlanta. He asked me about the farm. He asked me, with the stilted curiosity of someone learning a language they'd been told they didn't need, what secondary markets meant in terms of investment strategy. I explained it to him simply and accurately. He listened with the focus of a man who had spent his career in insurance and understood risk, even if he'd never applied that understanding to this particular category of asset. Smart approach, he said. He said it like it surprised him. I thanked him like it didn't surprise me. The evening was winding down by then. The catering staff was clearing the dessert table and the string lights had been dimmed to the level that communicated the last act of the night. Becca and Holden were doing the rounds of extended goodbyes, accepting final embraces and congratulations. Grant was beside me. He had been beside me for the last 40 minutes, which was longer than he typically stayed in close orbit at his family's events. I didn't comment on it. Lorraine came to say goodbye. She came to me first, which was also new. "Meredith," she said. Then she stopped. She seemed to be deciding between several things she might say, running through options the way you do when none of the available scripts feels adequate. "Thank you for coming all this way," she settled on finally. "Of course," I said. "It was a lovely evening." A pause. "Patricia Holloway," she said. She's a significant person in this city." "She seems to be," I said. "She doesn't give her card to people," Lorraine said. And then, quieter, almost like she was reasoning it out for herself, "She asked for yours." "She did," I said. Another pause, the longest one of the evening. 6 years of silences between us had a particular quality, comfortable for her, practiced for me. This one was different. This one was hers. "I think," Lorraine said carefully, that we haven't." She stopped. Started again. "Grant talks about your work. I don't think I've listened the way I should have." She said it like a woman discovering that a door she believed was decorative had been a structural wall all along. There was something almost poignant in it. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel the hot satisfaction I might have felt 3 years ago, or 2 years ago, or even 1 year ago, when I would have rehearsed exactly this moment in the long mental arguments I used to have with her image on my worst evenings. I felt mostly tired, and something else, something adjacent to freedom. "There's time," I said, and I meant it, though I also meant the other thing underneath it. "There's time, but the terms are different now. There's time, but I am no longer the one asking for anything." Grant held my hand on the drive back to the hotel. He was quiet for a while, watching the Nashville skyline from the passenger window. Then he said, "The Keating Group. What does that mean if they want a partner?" I told him. I gave him the numbers that I hadn't given Lorraine or Stuart or Becca or any of the church friends or the pleasant woman who had assumed I was tired. I gave him the numbers and I watched his face in the passing light of the highway. "Why haven't you told me all of this?" he said. He wasn't angry. He was the particular kind of quiet that comes before something shifts. "You never asked," I said. "Not really." He was silent again for a long time. "I should have," he said. "Yes," I said. "You should have. It wasn't a fight. It didn't need to be." The truth had a way of arriving, eventually, at the right speed, not with the force of a confrontation, but with the weight of something that had been true all along and was simply no longer avoidable. We pulled into the hotel parking garage and sat in the car for a moment before going inside. The engine ticked as it cooled. "My mother's going to call you tomorrow," Grant said. "I know," I said. "What are you going to say?" I thought about it. About the 6 years of dinners and holidays and careful performances. About the version of me that Lorraine had decided existed before I ever opened my mouth. About the slow, unglamorous, mostly solitary work of building something real while the people who should have been paying attention were busy not paying attention. "I'll pick up," I said. "That's new enough." We went inside. The hotel room was quiet and clean and entirely mine in the way that all neutral spaces are when you no longer need them to be anything other than what they are. I sat on the edge of the bed and texted June, "Let's do the Keating call Monday. Get Patricia Holloway's contact info if you can. Separate thread, family foundation. I met her tonight." June responded in 40 seconds. "Wait. Tonight? I have so many questions." I put the phone face down on the nightstand. Through the window, Nashville was lit up and ordinary and beautiful in the way that cities look when you're looking at them from the outside, from a place of your own that doesn't require anyone else's permission. I had not won anything tonight by announcing myself. I had won something by no longer needing to. The difference between those two things was the whole of it. Every quiet hour I had worked while Lorraine decided I was decorative, every deal I had closed while Becca assumed I was along for the ride, every long drive back to Atlanta where I had sat with the particular patience of someone who knew that truth was not in any hurry. It had arrived tonight without any help from me. It would keep arriving. That was the part they hadn't counted on. Not that I had built something, but that I had built it with enough patience to wait for exactly the right moment to simply exist in the same room as the evidence. I turned off the light. Tomorrow I would send June the portfolio deck and confirm the Keating call. I would pick up Lorraine's call when it came because I was 31 years old and capable of deciding, finally, that the conversation could happen on different terms without me needing to explain why. Tonight there was only this: the quiet, the city. The small, solid satisfaction of a woman who had stopped waiting to be seen and simply become, somewhere along the way, impossible to miss. I've thought a lot about what that night actually was. Not a victory, not a revenge, just a correction. The kind that takes years to arrive and about 45 seconds to land. The thing about Lorraine is that she wasn't uniquely cruel. She was ordinary in the way that a lot of dismissive people are ordinary. She had decided who I was before she had any real information about me, and then she spent 6 years selecting only the details that confirmed what she had already decided. That's not malice. That's just the way the human mind operates when it's never been forced to question its own assumptions. And the uncomfortable truth is that nobody had ever forced Lorraine to question anything about how she treated me because I had never made it costly for her not to. That's the part I had to sit with on the drive back to the hotel, Grant quiet beside me in Nashville going dark outside the windows. I had made it easy. Not intentionally, not from weakness, but from a particular kind of pride. I had refused to perform my own worth for people who weren't worth performing for, and in doing so, I had also, without meaning to, removed any friction that might have accelerated the truth. Friction matters. I understand that now. Not the friction of arguments or confrontations or the exhausting work of defending yourself to someone who isn't listening. A different kind, the friction of simply being undeniable, of letting your actual life exist in the same room as the story someone else has been telling about you. Patricia Holloway was not a weapon I deployed. She was just a person asking real questions, and I gave her real answers, and the contrast with 6 years of Lorraine's something with properties did all the work that needed doing without me lifting a finger. That's what I mean when I say truth doesn't need help. It needs patience. It needs you to stay in the room long enough for it to arrive on its own terms. What I keep coming back to is the Keating call. The Harrington deal in the original version of the story was a $40 million real estate portfolio that I had built deal by deal, market by market for 4 years while Lorraine was deciding I was decorative. Every closed acquisition was a choice I made quietly, without asking anyone's permission or waiting for anyone's approval. That's what I want people to understand, not the number, but the mechanism. You build the thing first. You don't wait until someone believes in you to begin. You begin, and eventually the thing you've built becomes large enough that belief becomes irrelevant. Lorraine called the next morning, like Grant said she would. I picked up. We had a short conversation that was honest in a way our conversations had never been before, not because she apologized exactly, but because she asked me a direct question about my work and waited for the full answer instead of redirecting. It was a small thing. It was also the first real thing that had ever passed between us. I don't know what comes next with her. I'm 31 and I have a long time ahead of deciding what I want that relationship to look like, and for the first time I feel like I actually get to decide instead of simply enduring. That shift, from enduring to deciding, is the whole of it. That's the thing I want to carry forward, not the moment Patricia asked for my card, not the look on Lorraine's face when she realized. The earlier moment, years before any of this, when I sat down and built something real without asking whether anyone would notice. They didn't notice for a long time, and I kept building anyway. That's the only part of this story that actually belongs to me.